Y'all are welcome to come down if you prefer. You can also just hang there if you want, but if you'd like to come down, please feel free. So within our scriptures today, we find two threads that I'd like to explore with you. The first is the thread of leadership, and the second is the thread of greatness. As faithful people and followers of Jesus, how do we understand leadership and success, both individually and as a collective of the church or the institution of the church? In Mark, in our gospel, Jesus has told the disciples for the second time now in the Gospel of Mark what is to take place and what is expected of them as future leaders of God's people. They have to wonder what this all means for them. What will happen to them? What will happen after he's gone? Who gets to be in charge? But rather than asking him directly, they begin to argue among themselves about who will step into leadership and who will be in charge, who of them will be the greatest. Now, if we look at James, seeing that the leaders of the church have become enamored with their self-importance and power and control and have put their trust in their own wisdom instead of in God's, he reminds them that what God's wisdom is. And he reminds them that if they draw near to God, God will surely draw near to them. Now, if I asked you to name the attributes of great and wise leadership, I am sure that you could make a list. I imagine that some of your answers would align with those that James names today in his lesson. James tells us that God's wisdom is actualized in leadership that looks like this. It is pure. It is peaceable. It is gentle. Willing to yield. Full of mercy and bearing good fruit. Some attributes we might add to that list are honesty, being accessible, good listening skills, honoring one's word, being flexible or open, committed to serving others well. With a focus on mission, leaders are to guide not with favoritism or partiality, but in a way that engages and invites the participation of all. Do those sound, yeah? I'm sure you have some others you would add to it. James also, though, speaks to what leadership is not. The wise do not lead with partiality, and they are not hypocrites. They don't say this and do that. They don't play both sides against the middle. Bitter envy, selfish ambition, arrogance, or an unwillingness to listen, putting more importance and trust in one's own sensibilities than in God's, are methods of leading that surely will result in conflict or disputes or even division. And I think one of the challenges that we face as being human is that when conflict arises between us, be it a difference of opinion or a struggle for some power and control, we can lose sight of one another. We stop seeing one another as ourselves, and we begin to see one another as the other. We may no longer be able to be in the presence of someone, to hear them, or to dialogue with them. So how are we to go forward in community in times when we feel such division? James suggests that in such times, we ought to seek the wisdom of God. If any lacks wisdom, he says, they should ask God for it, and it will be given, provided, and there is a caveat, provided that it is asked for with honest and honorable intention, not to serve oneself. And why is this? Because wisdom and faith are interconnected. Wisdom comes from God. Jesus is God's wisdom incarnate. And when we seek wisdom, God's wisdom, to guide and to shape our lives and our interactions with one another, to inform what we do, and especially to inform how we do it, we get better outcomes. Things go better for us. Now, conflict and difference are present all the time, difference of opinion. We find them at all levels of our lives. They are present between spouses. They are present between family members and friends. We find them in the workplace, in our social circles, institutionally, and most definitely in the church. A fallacy about the church is that it should be a place where nice people come and people treat one another kindly. It's a fallacy because we are actually not that special. We are a microcosm of the whole world, and each one of us comes here and brings with us all that we are and all that we are not. The ways in which we interact and how we address one another and our differences isn't so different than the way that the world does it. And yet, it ought to be. It ought to be, because Christ calls us to a higher standard. Christ calls us to live out our lives in God's wisdom, not with earthly guidance. And because we are an intentional community who share common values, common beliefs, and common practices, we might feel those disagreements more acutely, right? Because we really do want it to be good for all. I think it's far too easy for the church to boast about being wise and being great. We can go around telling people that St. Dunstan's is the most amazing church and it's fantastic and we are welcoming and everything is fine. But we cannot forget about the truth of our humanity, which is that sometimes we falter. Sometimes we are not as gracious as we intend to be. Sometimes we are not as kind as we are called to be. We are human, but we are a community that strives to be that. Our call is to love and to serve. It is that simple, and it whittles down to that. Now, all of us, myself included, I'm sure, have witnessed leaders who seem to not care about those they lead, but who are more vested in their own agendas, who have lost sight of God and God's wisdom. Always there will be conflicts among us, and we may disagree about how things should be done, or who should do them, or how they should be paid for, or why they matter, or what do they have to do with anything anyway. That is the truth of our existence. The greater question, though, is how, in the face of conflict and unhealthy leadership, we are to find our way back to one another, back to our common calling as disciples of Jesus. Will we, like the disciples, rather than turn to God for an explanation or help to understand, choose instead to argue and to pick petty fights with one another and to talk about what power is whose and why they have it? Will we, like the disciples, choose to not say anything at all and just exit the conversation to avoid the conflict? Many of us would prefer to simply disengage, to not deal with others who don't see or think like we do. Being willing to hear somebody else's viewpoint, being willing to try to understand how they feel is risky. We risk our vulnerability. We risk having our opinions and viewpoints challenged. Mostly, we risk the possibility of change because just maybe somebody has a point of view that we have been fighting but has something to teach us. And if we're attached so strongly to our viewpoints, we don't want to let go. But what if? What if we chose to embrace holy curiosity? Being people who are genuinely, curiously interested in the viewpoints and the feelings of others. People who want to know others' wonderings or fears, challenges or dreams. How might our lives be changed if we became that? Solutions Journalism posted a meme in social media a few days ago that really struck me and spoke to me. It's all about how we can have a conversation with people who disagree with us. Relevant, I think. The context of the meme was political, but I want to place it into the life of faith because I think that it's relevant to our faith life as well as our secular life. It poses 5 questions, and as I read each one of these questions to you, I'm going to give you a little space in between, and I'd like you to take a moment and hold that question. Imagine as you hear it what it might be like if someone took the time to ask you this question. And think about what it would be like for you if you had the courage to bridge asking that question of someone else. Which life experiences have shaped your views? Imagine for a moment that you got what you wanted in regards to an issue. How would your life be changed? Or conversely, if you didn't get what you seek, how would you be? For those who disagree with you, what would you like them to understand or know about you? And what is it that you would like to understand or know about those with whom you disagree? And last, why is this issue personally important to you? Tough questions. But they're designed to open up dialogue if you're willing to listen to what is said. Each of them is shaped inside of an invitation to allow every person the space and the grace to speak about what matters to them and why. The what and the why matter. Sometimes we can hear a person's request or opinion or a suggestion, and immediately, because of our own assumptions or our own viewpoints, we put up the barriers and we're unable to hear them openly. But who is great among us? I say all of us. Who among us is poised to lead, to teach, to foster faith, to be wise, and to have understanding? Every one of us. Because to be wise is not to be intelligent. It's not about how smart you are, although you are all very, very smart. It is about living a life well with gentleness born of wisdom. Jesus is clear when he calls the little children to him that to be great is to be tender-hearted and to be gentle and to serve the least of these and to be last and to actually position yourself so you're not so great, but otherwise to raise others up. If you and I believe in the divine wisdom that comes from above and that reflects the very nature of God versus our human nature, then we would agree that James says to be a good leader is to be peaceful and gentle merciful, forgiving, people who bear good without condition or partiality, people who detach themselves from personal opinion but seek to do good for the whole and the well, people who are not hypocritical, people who care about others. Now, I want to say to you that as your priest, these are lessons that I take quite seriously, because I am in a position of leadership and I stand before you week after week, teaching and preaching and saying things and guiding and leading. And it is my heartfelt desire to follow God's leading and to seek God's wisdom in what I do. And I, like all of you, are human. And so from time to time, I fail. So we need to collectively, prayerfully, work to keep this in check, to push down that possibility of our ego taking over. Because if we defend with power, if we practice on overstepping and squashing people down, pushing questions aside, ignoring dissent, not welcoming a difference of opinion, we will do more harm to ourselves and the world than we will do good. Inside of our mission statement, we start with these 4 words: come, explore, serve, be. Each is an invitation and calls all of us as the church to do all that we can to ensure that this church and this community and each one of us in our encounters with one another are a safe space for others. St. Dunstan's and the church at large must be a place where it's okay to ask questions, where expressing different opinions and doing things differently is welcomed. We must choose to be led by God's wisdom, which breeds gentleness and a willingness to let go of this human fallacy of power, the fallacy of control, and this story about greatness. Because if we believe our own press, we can get into trouble. We really can. Can we commit to making St. Dunstan's and the church a place where there is enough resource, enough space, enough grace, and enough opportunity and love for all people? No matter who they are, where they come from, what their story is, how they vote, it doesn't matter. Can we be committed to that? We don't sometimes see much of this love and this goodness and this gentleness on display in the world around us. It's there. Sometimes we notice it. But a lot of times we're seeing things that are far from it. But we can't lose hope. We've got to believe in it, in this wisdom of God, and that it will prevail. And that if we just will trust in God's wisdom to lead the way, then we will be people of God who can change the world. Amen. And now we can have the